Right now, emergency sirens are blaring in Bahrain, and civilian buildings are being hit in Oman. As the UAE vows revenge, the Gulf is descending into an uncontrolled spiral of chaos. When we look at May 4, 2026, we see that the crisis didn't erupt out of nowhere. It climbed, step by step, up a ladder of escalation. It all started when US Central Command, CENTCOM, launched the operation called Project Freedom, aimed at securing international maritime trade in the region and breaking the de facto blockade. Project Freedom is defensive in nature, focused in scope, and temporary in duration. According to Reuters' May 4th report, American destroyers advanced toward the Strait of Hormuz, the jugular vein of global oil flow, under close cover from fighter jets and helicopters. This move was a reflection of Washington's freedom of navigation doctrine. However, Tehran chose to read this maneuver as a direct attack on its sphere of influence and a violation of the existing ceasefire. The first signal that the tension was about to turn into a kinetic confrontation came when the IRGC Navy suddenly activated its coastal and ship radars that had previously been kept silent. According to open-source intelligence reports and leaked radio intercepts, Iranian forces began issuing warning after warning to the American destroyers. In these recordings, also confirmed by the Tasnim news agency, it was announced that any attempt toward the strait would break the ceasefire and would be met with a military response. But when the US fleet ignored these radio announcements and continued on its planned course, Iran's military activated its infamous asymmetric naval tactics. Small, agile, low radar signature fast boats belonging to the IRGC rapidly spread out. Not toward the main American warships, but toward the international commercial cargo ships trying to transit the strait. The goal was not to directly hit the American Navy, but to paralyze the commercial traffic they were trying to protect and create a wave of panic. The first victim of this tactical move was the massive cargo ship HMM Namu, linked to South Korea. The vessel, sailing near UAE waters, was harassed by Iranian boats and then targeted by missiles. A violent explosion rocked the ship's engine room, and the black smoke rising into the sky was recorded as the first visual proof that the ceasefire had effectively collapsed. The attacks didn't stop there. British-flagged cargo ships sailing north of Dubai were also placed in the crosshairs of these fast boats. According to Al Jazeera's May 4th report and The Guardian's live coverage, the British government confirmed a fire broke out in one of its ship's engine rooms. Yet its failure to mount any concrete military response exposed the operational weakness of some European powers in the region during moments of crisis. With commercial shipping being fired upon so recklessly, the US military's rules of engagement were activated within seconds. This was the true breaking point in the chronology of events. A H-64 Apache and MH-60 Seahawk attack helicopters, launched from American destroyers, locked onto the Iranian boats maneuvering like hunters across the surface of the sea. Though these small boats could execute fast maneuvers due to the nature of asymmetric warfare, they stood zero chance against advanced thermal optics and air-to-surface precision munitions. As CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper confirmed, at least 6 Iranian fast boats harassing commercial ships were instantly destroyed by helicopter fire.
And then the small boats were all going into commercial ships, and all were sunk by Apaches and Seahawk helicopters.
According to CBS News' May 4th report, the boats sank within seconds, while US President Trump claimed on his social media platform Truth Social that 7 boats had been sunk, adding, "That's all they have left." According to Reuters, no damage was reported on any American assets, while this devastating tactical blow at sea pushed Tehran into a far more aggressive and dangerous retaliation cycle. Immediately after the loss of the fast boats, events leaked from sea level to land and sky. Iran's military activated its land-based launch ramps to compensate for its vulnerability at sea. According to NPR's May 4th report, cruise missiles and kamikaze drones were fired in rapid succession from Isfahan, Bushehr, and the main southern naval base of Bandar Abbas. But this time, the target was not the American warships in open water. Iran turned its missiles directly toward its neighbor, the United Arab Emirates. On the opposite shore of the Gulf, UAE Ministry of Defense Systems instantly detected these threats approaching their airspace. As sirens began to wail, air defense batteries engaged. According to Gulf News' May 4th report, 3 of the 4 cruise missiles in the first wave were intercepted over UAE territorial waters, while 1 fell into the sea. But the attacks did not stop. They continued in 5 consecutive waves. It was during these swarm attacks that drones that managed to penetrate the air defense net struck the civilian and industrial heart of the UAE, the Fujairah Industrial Zone. According to the NY Post, a massive explosion was followed by a colossal fire at the facility. At least 3 Indian nationals were injured, and the black smoke covering the sky was the official image that the war had transformed from a controlled naval skirmish into a regional infrastructure devastation. When we step back from the military tempo and look at the place of that burning Fujairah facility within the global system, we understand why this crisis is not an ordinary regional conflict. The fire at Fujairah was not just an oil terminal going up in flames. This was the global energy strangulation strategy being activated in practice. Iran's missiles did not hit a random target. Fujairah is the endpoint where the ADCOP, Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, a vital lifeline for the UAE, meets the sea. This pipeline allows the UAE to deliver its oil directly to the safer Gulf of Oman, and from there to the Indian Ocean, without ever entering the narrow waters of the Strait of Hormuz that are susceptible to mining and blockade. According to MEES's May 4th report, with a capacity to carry 1.5 million barrels of crude oil per day, expandable to 1.8 million in emergencies, this facility is an irreplaceable bypass route for Asian markets and the Western world when the strait closes or becomes unsafe. Iran's devastation of this facility with drones is a blackmail message that is easy to read, but very hard to digest. If we can't export our oil through Hormuz, your billion-dollar bypass routes aren't safe either. When this event is combined with the similar targeting of Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline to the Red Sea in April, according to Energy Newsbeat, its daily 700,000 barrel capacity was knocked out. It becomes clear that there is a systematic plan to destroy energy infrastructure. According to BBC's May 4th report, the reverberations of these attacks on global markets were merciless and instant. The moment images of Fujairah port burning hit the news agencies, Brent crude oil's price per barrel made a sudden jump of 5 to 6%, surging from $114 to the $119 threshold. The disruption of oil loading operations created deep panic among investors. If these facilities suffer permanent damage and bypass routes become inoperable, global inflation targets will be wiped out, and industrial giants and importing nations will be dragged into a severe cost bottleneck. This is a heat felt on the back of the necks of not just the Gulf, but all world economies from Europe to Asia. But on the other side of the coin, there is a massive geopolitical rage and desire for retaliation forming on the ground. The United Arab Emirates had generally pursued a policy of strategic patience against hundreds of ballistic missiles and drone threats from Iran-backed proxies since February 28th, refraining from launching a direct counterattack. But the striking of Fujairah was the last drop that overflowed this cup of patience. The words attributed to the UAE Defense Committee chairman to his Israeli counterpart, "We cannot stay silent about these launches, we will retaliate," show that diplomatic language has given way to kinetic preparations. The activity in the region is making this search for revenge tangible. The UAE administration has put all its cards on the table against Iran's provocative move. Civil defense protocols across the country have been raised to the highest level. According to DW's May 5th report, the ripple effect of the attacks crossed borders, civilians being injured when a residential building in northern Oman took a hit, and Bahrain officially declaring a national emergency and suspending flights in its airspace, document that the crisis has turned the entire Gulf into a war zone. The Arabian Peninsula is, in a historically rare manner, in serious preparation for a reaction against this direct aggression on its own borders. The wound the UAE has suffered is now too deep to be brushed off with mere diplomatic condemnations, and the demand for revenge is being voiced louder with every passing hour. When we place Iran's operational steps into the bigger picture, what emerges is not a regional hegemon testing its strength, but a trapped structure trying to export its internal collapse outward. Understanding why the Tehran regime was so eager to break the ceasefire and directly strike a neighbor like the UAE requires decoding the regime's psychology. Prolonged sanctions, economic bottlenecks, water crises, and the power struggles between different factions in domestic politics have accumulated a massive wave of civilian and elite discontent inside Iran. During the relatively calm weeks when the ceasefire was in effect, this internal pressure had begun to shake the foundations of the regime. The most well-known survival reflex of dictatorships is to create an urgent, existential enemy abroad in order to suppress a potential mutiny or wave of uprising at home. This is precisely why they deliberately escalated the tension at sea, using the US Project Freedom operation as a pretext, and then fired their missiles while blaming their neighbors. The declaration of new maritime control lines by Iranian officials between Mubarak Mountain and the UAE's Al-Quwain coast is also part of this "Hormuz is under our control" propaganda, aimed at the domestic audience. But on the ground, things did not go as they planned. Iran was hoping that Washington would become paralyzed by uncertainty, as in previous crises, and would avoid retaliation. Indeed, some reports from the Washington Post claimed that some Navy commanders were hesitant to confirm the attack and force Trump into action. But the reality on the ground wrote a different story. The helicopters sinking the boats showed that the American military does not hesitate to use kinetic force when its red lines are crossed. Moreover, the Trump administration's complete shelving of nuclear negotiations and inclusion of names like Nick Stewart, who advocates aggressive solutions, into the team clarified the "surrender or destruction" message to Tehran. While Iran hoped to deter the US, it trapped itself inside a far harsher military doctrine. An even more critical point is Iran making official statements through its channels that it has no plan to target the UAE, while missiles are falling on UAE cities. Such inconsistencies indicate that the regime either does not have full control over its own military elements, or is too afraid to take responsibility for its actions on the diplomatic stage. Whichever scenario is true, this situation has cemented the perception among Gulf states that Iran is not a negotiable state, but a rogue threat source. There may be several scenarios on the table for the coming hours and days. First scenario: the UAE carries out a symbolic or direct retaliation, striking Iranian ports or oil facilities, and then waiting for the US and Israel to move in. Second scenario: as CNN sources reported on May 4th, US-Israeli strikes resume against targets inside Iran within the next 24 hours. This time, the targets may not be limited to military facilities. Trump had previously listed civilian infrastructure like water treatment plants, power stations, as targets as well. Third and most critical scenario: the Arab coalition formally declares war on Iran. If this move, involving the UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain under Saudi leadership, materializes, the geopolitical framework of the war changes completely. This would no longer be Trump's war or Israel's war. It would become the war of Arab nations exercising legitimate self-defense. And from a strategic standpoint, the possibility of a ground operation may also be on the table. Kark Island, Iran's oil export center, and Keshem Island are critical points for Hormuz control. The capture of these islands could completely end the IRGC's naval capacity. Iran's restarting of the war with these attacks has paradoxically united its enemies. The US, Israel, and now the Arab states are on the same side. And Iran has neither a navy left to counter this coalition, nor air power, nor air defense. On the night of May 4th, 2026, the ceasefire in Hormuz was broken. By breaking the ceasefire, Iran united its enemies. Now it faces the US, Israel, and the Arab world. But it has no navy left, no air power, and no air defense. War is back. And this time, the outcome could be very different. So what do you think? Can Iran survive this war? Will the Arab coalition actually enter the war? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.